Is there anything more annoying in the wintertime, or I should say, when the winter turns to spring, as realizing how dirty your car is? It's like you don't notice it during the cold weather. And then one day you get a really nice sunny day, maybe the mid-50s, which here in New England is what we consider a nice sunny day in the early spring. And you look at your automobile and you're like, it's disgusting. It's filthy. The outside, the inside. I know there's some neat freaks out there, but someone like me doesn't, clean the car during the cold weather. I'm pretty good about keeping it clean, during the summer months, but in the cold weather, I kind of put it off a little bit. And then today I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, this is horrible. This has got to get fixed immediately. So tomorrow I'm thinking it's time to give the car a good cleaning. And with my luck, it'll get cold for the next 2 weeks or rain or who knows, snow or something, and it'll get dirty again. But I just cannot stand looking at my car. Actually, I drive a truck, so looking at my truck, which is even a bigger mess because it's obviously a bigger vehicle. And just thinking to myself, man, you were really, really lazy during the winter. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the QuickDisTakes Podcast. I am your host, as usual, Tim LeBeau, joined today by absolutely nobody. Dan actually had a prior commitment today and could not be here for the podcast. So, I'm going to go it alone and see if I can just do my best. Just a quick reminder, you can check out the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, as well as this post I'll be putting on my YouTube channel. And if you need to get a hold of me, you can email me at thebacksideofwater@icloud.com or hit me up on Twitter at thebacksideofw1. Okay, so a couple of things today I wanted to discuss. A couple of news-related things, and then we'll do the usual 50 tweaks for 50 days and overrated, underrated. First thing, Disney announces that they are no longer going to allow smoking in the parks. This I found to be an interesting topic for a couple of reasons. One, I am not a smoker, so I can't speak to this too well. I can say that visiting the parks through the years, smoking has never been something that's bothered me there. I believe the designated areas are in really good areas and don't really seem to get in any way, or you don't seem to smell it, or at least from my personal experience, it had never bothered me. However, I am surprised that it has actually been this long for Disney to do this. If you consider where you live, most people where they live, you can't, obviously there's no smoking in public places, a lot of public parks, things of that nature. So I'm actually very surprised that this had gone on as long as it has, and I'm not very surprised that Disney's finally kind of, went ahead with this. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are aggravated, and once again, not being a smoker, I can't speak to what it's like to, not be able to have a cigarette every so often, when you're out on a vacation, and obviously days at Disney are rather long. So I'm sure a lot of people are a little bit irked about that. I've heard that there's been threats on Twitter and other social media saying they're going to cancel their vacations and this isn't right. And, obviously you got to expect some of that backlash for things like this. But as far as whether or not Disney made the right choice here, I don't really have a definitive opinion. Like I said, I never really found it to be a bother to me. It being outside and into areas, off to the side, I always thought they kind of handled it well. But obviously somebody or either, a bunch of complaints came through, or they decided they just wanted a clean, maybe a, a cleaner look for the park. Once again, I'm not sure if that lends to that, but whatever the deal was, or whatever came up, obviously they thought it necessary to make this move. And once again, I don't think anyone is too surprised at this. I mean, you have to figure Disney's been going, in similar directions like this. Although alcohol is more prevalent in the parks than ever before. So if you want to look at it that way, that's kind of an interesting contrast. But it's a decision they made, and I think it can be kind of annoying, I'm sure, for someone that is a smoker and that now has to go outside the gate. I guess there's going to be designated areas outside the parks to smoke, but we'll see what kind of repercussions this brings to them as far as attendance. It's Disney. I'm fairly certain that this is not really going to be a lasting after effect or anything that they're too worried about on that. The other thing I wanted to talk about in the news, and I reviewed it on the channel briefly. I shouldn't say reviewed. I gave my first kind of impressions. Dumbo rakes in $45 million domestically. I believe another 76 or so in the foreign markets, for a total of $116 million, roughly. Now, I'm not sure what Disney was really expecting out of this movie. I mean, there are 3 live-action movies coming out this year, this being the first of the 3, obviously, which was slated, given a March release date, which is not exactly a prime release date, especially when fans are gearing up for, the Avengers Endgame, Episode 9 of Star Wars, coming this holiday season. Obviously, Aladdin and Lion King, I believe, being much more popular live-action adaptations that are coming out this year, although I use the quotation marks when I say live-action as far as Lion King goes. Toy Story 4, Frozen 2, all those movies. I wonder what Disney really expected to get out of this. I saw the movie, like I said, on opening night with my daughter, and I gave it a 6.5 out of 10 on my first impressions, and I'm kind of sticking by that. I found the movie to be, a lot of it was what you would expect. It was the story of Dumbo, and it was expanded upon a bit in a human, set in a human world. No more anthropomorphic animals, like the original film. I found the CGI in particular to be weak at times, or most of the time, which I always find interesting when you get a movie that is out, in 2019, where you think they've kind of got CGI. You've seen other movies where they do a really good job with it, and you wonder why they cannot nail the CGI in a movie like Dumbo, especially when it's really relying on the CGI heavily with obviously a flying elephant and dealing with elephants in general in the movie. The story, obviously, like I said, expanded upon on the original. Was a decent story. It was, nothing, if you like the first Dumbo, the story would be fine. It'd suit you fine on this one. But it just, for me personally, I've kind of got Tim Burton fatigue. I mentioned this in my impression video that I put out that night. And it really has the Tim Burton look to it, which I know maybe isn't a big deal, or maybe, a lot of people love it. Obviously, they keep hiring this guy, so, and it's not that I want to hate on Tim Burton or anything, but when they have, just some of the, I feel like some of the visuals just gives you a feeling of, like, it doesn't give you like a real world feeling when they go to the actual park where, Michael Keaton runs a park, and eventually Dumbo's circus that he's with joins this park. And when you get to this, to the scenes where this park exists, it just has that almost steampunk feel to it, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And it just didn't do the movie any justice. And once again, going back to it just being a take, obviously, on the original story, which I wasn't I'll put this as a disclaimer, I wasn't a huge fan of that story either. It wasn't one of my personal favorite Disney movies. I think it wasn't a lot of people's personal favorite Disney movies, which is why I think they kind of gave it this mediocre, spot on the calendar this year. Not a ton of hype. And I think a lot of people, they showed it at the box office this weekend when, only $45 million domestically worth of people, showed up to see this movie. And, once again, not to harp on the same thing over and over again, but the CGI was just not great. And I feel like when you make a movie like that and the CGI is not great, you're just not going to get, it's hard to suspend disbelief. And it really just didn't, for me, it just didn't work too well. It wasn't horrible. It was a good, a good movie to take your kids to, obviously. And that's why I kind of still gave it a decent grade, essentially a D, 65%. And I'm sure I've seen some reviews from other YouTubers, and some people do like it, and that's fine. Obviously people are going to have varying opinions, but I do think overall the general reaction to this would be not in favor of it being a good movie, and I think a lot of people are probably gonna pass on it, when it comes to buying it later down the road. I would certainly recommend just kind of skipping this one and then grabbing it on Amazon as a rental when it comes out. Good movie for the family to sit around and watch, but nothing memorable, nothing too great. The acting and things like that were fine. Colin Farrell was great. Danny DeVito's always great. Michael Keaton's fine. It was just, I would say overall the feel was just off to me, and that's what really, bothered me about the movie as a whole. And I think it's interesting too, getting away from talking about the actual movie, but that's made $45 million in its opening weekend. Because you would think, even though it wasn't one of the more popular Disney, well, I shouldn't say it isn't one of the more popular ones. I'm sure plenty of people like this movie, and I'm speaking towards the original. And they certainly have an iconic ride in the parks and things like that. But it speaks to, you wonder if, it's just people weren't that excited about this movie. Obviously is part of the reason, I'm sure, or if it was because, and I was talking to my friend last night about this, if they're just kind of having, this kind of Disney fatigue where you're getting a lot of these types of movies. I mean, I'm a fan of the idea that they're doing these live adaptations, live action adaptations. But at the same time, that because they own so much, they're just throwing a lot at you. And I feel like maybe people are kind of getting, kind of blah about that, or they're looking at their wallets and saying, well, I'm going to see some of these movies, but I'm going to pick and choose which movies I see because there's just so many. And obviously Dumbo is, at least for me, and I'm sure for most, although Dan was saying it was high on his list, but for most, I think it was kind of low on the list as far as what Disney was, going to throw at you this year, especially with movies, Star Wars, the final episode of that trilogy coming out, and as I mentioned, and the Avengers and things like that. So I guess it kind of makes sense that it did. I mean, it was number one in the box office, but overall kind of poorly for, what Disney expects. I would have thought it would have at least broke 100 million, opening weekend. Domestically, that would have been my guess, but didn't even get halfway there. So I don't know. We'll see what happens when Aladdin comes out. I'm sorry, with Dan not being here, I'd had my pint of Guinness to keep me company. I've actually recently took a trip to Ireland back in January and grown kind of fond of Guinness, so I figured I'd have a couple of beers while I was doing this podcast today to keep me company. I'm sure my dog also will be joining us at some point or another. But anywho, so that's all I have to talk about as far as news goes. And I think I'm going to refer to this from now on as more point of interest than news. I'm not going to really necessarily, report on each news event that comes out each week for Disney. I just kind of pick and choose the ones I think are worth talking about on the podcast, and just kind of bullet point those. So we'll keep that format kind of going. As far as 50 tweaks for 50 years, I was thinking about this one today a lot because there's so many to be done. And the one I think I want to talk about today, and tweaks might be a light way to put this, is journey into imagination with Figment. Or I'm sorry, journey into your imagination with Figment. I think most people listening to this will agree that this attraction needs a tweak. It got one when it originally skewed away from it, was received its second incarnation. A year later, it was tweaked again because it was so bad. And what we have now isn't, I wouldn't say so bad, but it's obviously not. Wouldn't be the first ride you would take somebody on if you were to drag them down to Disney to show them why you love Disney so much. It doesn't really encompass, the quality that the better Disney attractions encompass, which is kind of sad in the sense because the original attraction was done so well. And always, I make videos on my YouTube channel always talking about, and endorsing changes in the park, and I do. But I think changes have to be made carefully sometimes, and I don't think the change on this one was made carefully. Originally, I think it kind of got gobbled up in the Eisner era, let's save a little money type strategy, where, I guess they were having whatever issues they were having with the old attraction, which was, in my opinion, a classic. Probably, maybe my favorite all-time Disney attraction, ever, if not second behind Horizons. But I guess they found that it was time to make a change to it, and when they did, as we all know, it was obviously just not anything on the scale of what the previous version of the ride was like. It for lack of a better way to put it, lacked imagination. It just had this really we're going to drive the educational aspect of imagination into you on this ride and not really give more of a narrative of what it was like as far as having fun with the idea of imagination. You rode into the first one, you come into the Dream Finder, he sings one little spark, then you start to experience elements of imagination but done well with show scenes and things like that. And with this one, it's a little bit better than, obviously, that, like I said, the second incarnation, but it just lacks that Disney feel. It feels like it was just forced. Like they were going to try to take that angle on explaining imagination, and they just didn't know what they were really going to do with it. And the props and the colors and just the overall feel of the whole idea that you're in this lab and this institution, and they worked in, obviously, previous scientists from movies, Wayne Zielinski from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and Robin Williams' character, which I can't think of right now, from Flubber, and all that kind of stuff, to try to, I guess, give it more of a, theme, in the movie, just these movies exist in the same universe type of feel, or whatever they were going for there. But it just, to me, it doesn't work. And when are there ever wait times? People just, Dan spoke of the Pixar theater that's on the side of it, which is also in dire need of a tweak. But it just seems like that whole area as a whole is just in dire need of work. It just doesn't draw crowds over there anymore. And I think that Pavilion just is in desperate need of an overhaul. And Journey into Imagination, that should be overhauled. But the idea should be kept. We should get back to the original concept to a certain degree with newer technology and obviously a fresher take. But try to capture some of the charm that original ride had and make it work for a modern ride. They could look into that and make that more effective and make people want to ride that ride again. I mean, Figment is an iconic character, maybe the most iconic non-movie or cartoon related character Disney has. I mean, that's essentially Epcot's mascot. And even with the ride being kind of poor, people still love Figment. So people are waiting for this to happen. And I think that if it were to happen, it would be a win for Disney there. I mean, they would just draw crowds at the Epcot. I think you'd even get a spike in attendance, for a period of time if people learn that this, classic character, were to be in an attraction that was enjoyable again. Not to mention, we need the Dreamfinder back. I mean, he needs to be in there. That dynamic of him and Figment plus him being a walk-around character outside the pavilion, it all just works so well. And it just makes you wonder, and like I said before, most likely because of budgetary, constraints, why they went ahead and did this. So I think a solid no-brainer tweak for the 50th, and most likely not going to happen by the 50th, but somewhere in that window of the 50th or maybe Epcot's 40th, somewhere in there, they really need to take a look at this pavilion and get that up to speed and make it someplace that people want to visit again. Anyway, on to our last segment here, overrated and underrated. Now, I'm going to be honest, I hadn't prepared because I was going to let Dan take this segment this week. But seeing as though Dan is not here, I will try my best to do my own. And I'm going to pick one. Now, I picked Disney Dining, Walt Disney World Dining, the first podcast. But now I'm going to delve into that a little bit more, get a little more specific. And I am going to go with overrated. And I'm going to say Ohana. Now, I bring Ohana up as overrated. Now, it does not mean I don't like Ohana. I do like to go to Ohana. Most of the time we go to Ohana on our trips. But my mother on this last trip had pointed out a few things to me, and I kind of have to agree with her. And this is why I think Ohana is overrated. First of all, like any other Disney restaurant, the pricing is obnoxious. Second of all, you don't get to pick from a menu, which is interesting to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, when I'm in the mood, the offerings are good. But it's the same experience every time. I sit down, they bring the appetizer, plate to the middle of the table with the noodles and the wings and all that, and the dumplings and all that good stuff. And then they bring, your chicken, your steak, and your shrimp. The problem I have with this, and why I'm saying it's overrated, is because I just think people clamor to get to this restaurant, and I don't think it's worth going crazy for. Like I said, we do it on our trips. If I can't get the ADR for it, I don't lose sleep. There have been times where I just wasn't able to get it, and I said, it's absolutely fine. I can go a week without having, a Disney week without having Ohana. The drinks selection on the menu, I haven't. Me personally, once again, this is an opinion, have not had a good drink at Ohana. I've had a couple of different mixed drinks there, because obviously with the meal plan, you got to take advantage of the free drink. I mean, who doesn't take advantage of the free drink? And I've just been disappointed every time I've had one. I find them to be too sugary and just not really that enjoyable. And as a matter of fact, this last trip, my aunt, my mother, myself, and my wife had all gotten a drink, and we all kind of tried each other's. And I didn't have a single one on that out of those, 4 total that I thought was good. And I've yet to finish a drink at Ohana. And for, to be on vacation and not finish a drink at dinner for me, is almost unheard of. And I want to say it was either my aunt or my wife didn't even get more than 2 or 3 sips into their drinks. And which is disappointing too, because when you're at the, that Polynesian vibe, you're automatically in a mood for one of these types of drinks, and they just, to me, haven't delivered. I will say, however, there are Dole Whips you can get with rum, down the stairs, which are completely worth it. So that always makes the visit over there a little more enjoyable afterwards as far as dessert goes. I just think the experience is not anywhere near the top of my list, and I think a lot of people put it on top of their list or very high on their lists, and I just think there's so many better places to eat in Disney. Now, here's one I always bring up. We enjoy the Sand Hill Inn at the Mexican Pavilion. The Mexico Pavilion. Now, I hear a lot of people criticize that restaurant, saying that they feel like it's not a very good place to eat and that the food feels like it might be frozen and kind of whipped up quickly. And I see what they're saying, but I can't remember a time where I've gone to that restaurant and I thought to myself I didn't have a decent meal. They're always good. It's a fairly easy reservation to get. You got a great ambiance and decent food and great mixed drinks. The margaritas there are amazing. And if anyone hasn't had an avocado margarita, I highly recommend that you get there and get one. With that said, I compare that, that experience to the Ohana experience, and I say nowhere near, in my opinion, the same. Even Tempanito over in Japan, the Coral Reef over in Living Seas, these restaurants are just so much better and a lot generally easier to get reservations for that I just can't really wrap my head around the idea that Ohana is in such high demand. I do understand that it is one of the better resorts on property, and I think that probably lends a little bit to the popularity of the restaurant. But as far as the overall meal experience, I would say just okay. Just an okay meal experience, and if you're not in the mood for chicken or steak, don't even bother going there. And the idea that you're going to get charged that much and you don't even really have a selection to choose from on a menu, other than a drink menu, is a little bit disappointing. So I'm gonna leave it at that this week, and love to hear some comments about your opinion on my overrated, underrated with Ohana, because I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me. You can leave those comments or questions on Twitter, once again, at the backside of W1. You can hit us up on our email address, which is thebacksideofwater@icloud.com, or leave a comment in the YouTube section below here on our channel, QuickDisTakes. So this week we have a video coming up. We're going to try to do videos probably bi-weekly. Our quick little take videos that we've done a couple now, one on Frozen and one on the changing of the Pirates of the Caribbean scene, the bride auction scene. And those seem to have done pretty well for us. So we're going to keep that series going, and we are going to have one this week on an interesting topic on whether or not Michael Eisner was a good or bad CEO for the Walt Disney Company. And I know we got a lot of mixed opinions on that over the years. And so it'll be interesting to see, to release my opinion on it and see kind of what people think about that. So that'll be coming out probably this weekend. And we're going to probably start to do a little more podcasting, like mini episodes, kind of like the length of this one. And I'm going to try to get some cool guests in here for you. I actually have a friend of mine who got married in Disney. I'm going to try to get her on the show to talk about, kind of her experience in the process of getting a wedding done at Disney, and, the costs and the options and things like that. And then I'm going to try to get a couple of more Disney outsiders, people that are just mild Disney fans, and kind of get their impressions of the park, because we're always, as this community on YouTube and, the podcast community, a bunch of us are, really big Disney fans, and we all have our likes and dislikes, and we're kind of, etched in stone over the years. I think it'd be kind of interesting to see what someone who goes to Disney, once in a while has to say about what's thrown at them at the parks and what they find to be, good food or entertaining, entertainment and things like that. So we're going to try to get a couple more of these out a week, so keep an eye out for those. And once again, we'll put them, they'll be on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, all those platforms, plus the YouTube channel. I'll always have these on there as well. So with that said, I'm out for now, and this has been Tim for Quick Diz Takes, and have a magical rest of your week.